The snow fell relentlessly across the Colorado mountains, transforming the winding road into a treacherous white serpent. Daniel Harris gripped the steering wheel of his pickup truck, peering through the windshield as wipers fought a losing battle against the accumulating snow. Beside him, Ranger's ears suddenly flattened against his skull, the German shepherd's body tensing with primitive alarm. Then Daniel saw it, a police cruiser buried violently in a snowbank, its driver's door torn open, and there, slumped against the rear wheel, a female officer in a blood-soaked uniform, her lips moving in desperate prayer. Between the bitter cold of a mountain winter and a dying cop's desperate plea, one father would discover that sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the only right one. Daniel Harris had deliberately chosen isolation the way soldiers choose defensive positions, with careful consideration of every angle, every approach, every possible threat. The cabin stood 17 miles from Cedar Falls, Colorado, at the end of a dirt road that most delivery drivers refused to navigate even in good weather. He'd purchased the property 6 years ago with Maria's life insurance money, a bitter irony that their daughter's security came from her mother's death. The 3-bedroom log structure sat on 40 acres of pine forest and meadow, far enough from civilization that Lily could grow up without the world's harsh edges cutting too deep too soon. At 36, Daniel carried himself with the controlled economy of movement that marked career military men. 6 years had passed since Maria's funeral. 6 years of learning to be both mother and father to a daughter who asked impossible questions about why mommy couldn't come back from heaven just for visits. Lily had been 13 months old when the cancer finally won its 18-month siege, too young to remember her mother's laugh that could fill a room or the way she'd dance in the kitchen while cooking, turning mundane meal preparation into celebration. The isolation served multiple purposes. It removed them from the suffocating sympathy of well-meaning neighbors, whose platitudes about God's plan made Daniel want to scream, that God's plan was apparently to leave a baby motherless and a husband hollowed out by grief. It provided space for their unconventional life homeschooling that happened at kitchen tables and forest clearings, lessons in survival skills alongside multiplication tables, bedtime stories about Maria that kept her memory alive without the weight of gravestone visits. Daniel worked as a technical writer for outdoor equipment companies, his military background lending authenticity to product descriptions. The work paid well enough, could be done remotely, and required just enough focus to keep his mind from spiraling into the dark places that still called to him on anniversaries and birthdays, and random Tuesdays, when Lily would tilt her head just like Maria used to. Lily Marie Harris was 7 years and 9 months old, as she would inform anyone with mathematical precision. She possessed her mother's delicate features wrapped around her father's steel core, a combination that produced a child both tender-hearted and remarkably resilient. Under Daniel's tutelage, she could identify 43 bird species by sight or sound, tie 8 different knots, including a Swiss seat-repelling harness, start a fire with flint and steel in under 2 minutes, and field dress a wound using supplies from their medical kit. These weren't the paranoid preparations of a doomsday prepper, but the practical education of a father who believed knowledge bred confidence. A child who could survive alone in the wilderness would never feel helpless in civilization. A girl who could defend herself would walk through the world differently than one who couldn't. These skills were armor, invisible but essential. Ranger had joined their small family 3 years ago, delivered personally by Master Sergeant Jim Rodriguez, Daniel's former squad leader who'd driven 14 hours from Fort Carson just to make the introduction properly. The 5-year-old German shepherd had completed 2 tours in Afghanistan, detecting IEDs, saving countless lives before the cumulative stress of explosions and gunfire had made him too reactive for continued service. "He's like you," Rodriguez had said, watching Ranger immediately position himself between Lily and the stranger. Done his duty, paid his dues, needs peace now. But the instincts don't go away. They just need different purpose. The dog had found that purpose in Lily, appointing himself her guardian with single-minded devotion. When she climbed trees, he circled below with barely contained anxiety. When she slept, He lay across her doorway, a living barrier against threats real and imagined. When delivery trucks rumbled up their drive, Ranger positioned himself between Lily and the strangers, relaxing only when Daniel gave the all-clear signal they'd practiced hundreds of times. The mailman had learned to leave packages at the gate, rather than test the shepherd's protective instincts. Officer Kate Miller represented everything Daniel had deliberately left behind: duty, service, the weight of other people's lives in your hands. At 28, she carried herself with the hard-won confidence of a woman who'd fought for every ounce of respect in a department dominated by men who saw her gender before her badge. 3 years on the Cedar Falls police force had taught her that protect and serve meant different things to different people, and that sometimes the greatest threats came from inside the department rather than outside. Kate had grown up in Cedar Falls, her childhood shaped by small-town values that she'd later discover were more mythology than reality. Her father had run Miller's Hardware for 30 years, extending credit to struggling families, organizing fundraisers for medical bills, embodying the community spirit Kate thought the police represented. Her mother taught 3rd grade at Cedar Falls Elementary, the same school Lily would have attended if Daniel believed in traditional education. Kate had left for the University of Colorado with dreams of changing the world, then returned with the more modest goal of protecting her small corner of it. The corruption had revealed itself gradually, like rust beneath fresh paint. The first time she'd witnessed a fellow officer pocket cash during a drug bust, she'd reported it to Sergeant Williams, who'd explained that sometimes evidence got misplaced, and she'd better learn the difference between seeing and witnessing. The second time, she'd gone directly to Lieutenant Morrison, who'd listened carefully, taken notes, then assigned her to solo night patrols in Riverside Cedar Falls' most dangerous neighborhood. The message was clear: stay quiet, or stay vulnerable. But Kate possessed her father's stubbornness wrapped in her mother's strategic thinking. If the system was corrupted from within, she'd document everything until the weight of evidence became undeniable. 3 months of careful recording on a hidden device, photographing documents after hours, copying files when the station was empty. She'd filled a USB drive with enough proof to dismantle a network that had operated for almost a decade. Officers and officials, enriching themselves, while the community they'd sworn to protect paid the price in addiction, violence, and shattered faith. The attack had come on Highway 50, the mountain road that connected Cedar Falls to the outside world. A deliberate ramming from behind that sent her cruiser spinning into the snowbank, followed by efficient violence, a knife between ribs, missing vital organs by inches, designed to look like injury from the crash. They'd been smart about it, choosing a night when the storm would erase evidence, when her death would seem like another tragic accident on a dangerous road. Kate had managed to crawl from the wreckage, her radio destroyed in the crash, her cell phone somewhere in the twisted metal, blood leaving her body with each heartbeat. She'd made it to the road's edge before collapse seemed inevitable, the USB drive clutched in fingers already going numb from cold and blood loss. Then headlights through the storm, a pickup truck slowing, stopping, and a man emerging who moved like he knew what violence looked like. Daniel approached the crashed cruiser with tactical caution, checking angles, assessing threats, his body remembering lessons learned in places where stopping to help could mean ambush. The moment he saw her uniform, his instinct was to call for help. But her desperate grip on his wrist stopped him cold. "Please," she'd whispered, breath forming weakening clouds in the freezing air. "Don't call it in. They'll kill us both if you call it in." The wound in her side spoke of deliberate violence rather than accidental injury. Daniel's hands moved with practiced efficiency, combat medical training never truly forgotten. He applied pressure while his mind calculated distances, options, contingencies. Ranger had begun a low, continuous growl, his attention fixed on the bend in the road where fresh tire tracks suggested recent departure. "Evidence," Kate managed, pressing the blood-slicked USB drive into his palm with desperate strength. "Everything's on there. 3 months of recordings, documents, proof. The chief, at least 15 officers. Maybe more. They're moving drugs through evidence, selling confiscated weapons, taking bribes to lose cases. The whole department's rotten. Daniel made his decision in the space between heartbeats. He scooped Kate into his arms, her weight negligible after years of hauling 40-pound rucksacks through Afghan mountains. The truck's cab was warm. Ranger immediately positioning himself beside the wounded officer, offering his body heat and steady presence as comfort. Daniel drove with controlled urgency, knowing that too much speed on these roads meant joining Kate's cruiser in a snowbank. Too little meant she might bleed out before they reached shelter. The cabin materialized through the storm, like something from one of Lily's fairy tale books. Windows glowing amber with firelight. Smoke rising from the chimney to disappear into the white chaos above. Daniel carried Kate inside, calling out to prepare his daughter for unexpected company. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs in her purple pajamas, clutching the stuffed rabbit that had been her constant companion since Maria's death. "Daddy, why is the police lady hurt?" "She had an accident, sweetheart. Remember what we talked about? How sometimes people need help, and we're the only ones who can give it." Lily nodded solemnly, then disappeared into her room, returning moments later with the first aid kit Daniel had given her for Christmas, real supplies in child-sized packages, because he believed in preparing her for reality rather than pretending it didn't exist. She stood beside him as he worked on Kate's wound, fetching clean towels and boiled water without being asked, her small face serious with concentration and concern. "You're very brave," Kate told her, managing a weak smile despite waves of pain. "What's your name?" "Lily Marie Harris. I'm 7¾ years old. Ranger is 5. But that's 35. In dog years. Which means he's older than Daddy, even though Daddy's the boss. Are you going to be okay? Daddy fixed a man once who was hurt worse than you. He had a hole right through his leg. And Daddy saved him with just his medical kit and some fishing line." The innocence of her chatter masked the fear Daniel could see in her eyes, the way she kept glancing at the blood despite trying not to, the tight grip she maintained on her rabbit. Kate's presence had shattered their carefully maintained bubble of safety, bringing the outside world's violence into their sanctuary. After Lily had been sent to brush her teeth and get ready for bed, normal routines maintained despite extraordinary circumstances, Kate explained the full scope of what she'd uncovered. The corruption had started small. Individual officers skimming cash from drug busts, but had metastasized into something systemic. Chief Morrison ran it like a corporation, complete with distribution networks, accounting systems, and enforcement mechanisms for anyone who threatened the operation. "They have leverage on everyone," Kate said, fever already building despite Daniel's medical intervention. Blackmail, threats, financial pressure, some joined willingly for the money. Others were coerced. One officer's daughter needed experimental cancer treatment the insurance wouldn't cover. They offered him a choice: join them and afford the treatment, or stay clean and watch his child die. What would you choose? Daniel looked toward the stairs where Lily had disappeared, understanding the terrible mathematics of parental desperation. "I'd like to think I'd find another way." Everyone thinks that until they're actually faced with the choice, until it's your child dying and someone offers you a lifeline, even if that lifeline is covered in blood. Ranger's sudden alertness preceded the sound of engines by 30 seconds, his training manifesting in the ridge of raised fur along his spine, the low rumble building in his chest. Daniel moved to the window, counting headlights through the storm, 3 vehicles, moving with deliberate purpose up his private road. This wasn't random. They'd been tracked, either through technology he didn't understand or by someone who'd followed his tire tracks through the snow. "Take Lily and run." Kate struggled to stand, reaching for her service weapon with hands that shook from fever and blood loss. "I'll delay them. Buy you time to get away. You can barely stand. much less shoot straight. Daniel was already moving, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. The rifle came from his bedroom closet. Along with the go bag, he'd always kept packed cash, documents, medical supplies, ammunition. Old habits from a life where preparedness meant the difference between coming home and coming home in a box. Lily appeared in her doorway already dressed in her winter gear, somehow sensing danger without being told. Bad men are coming? Maybe, sweetheart. Remember our camping game? The one where we see who can be quietest in the woods? She nodded, pulling on her boots with practiced efficiency that broke Daniel's heart. No 7-year-old should be this comfortable with danger, this ready to flee into a blizzard. But the world didn't care what should be, only what was. They slipped out the back door as the first vehicle pulled into the front drive, Ranger leading them into the forest he knew better than any human. Daniel carried Kate, her weight distributed across his shoulders in a fireman's carry, while Lily rode piggyback, her arms tight around his neck. The storm had intensified, wind driving snow horizontal, erasing their tracks almost instantly but also limiting visibility to mere feet. Behind them, flashlight beams swept through the cabin windows like searching fingers, voices carrying on the wind professional, organized, dangerous. These weren't local cops making overtime. This was a tactical team with specific orders and the training to carry them out. The forest path was treacherous even in daylight. In a blizzard at night, it became actively hostile. Daniel navigated by instinct and memory, occasionally checking the military compass he always carried, though magnetic north mattered less than intimate knowledge of every tree, rock, and gully between his cabin and potential sanctuary. Kate stumbled repeatedly, apologizing each time, her strength depleting with each step. Lily had gone silent, her face buried against Daniel's shoulder. Only the occasional sob, indicating she was still conscious. They'd covered barely half a mile when the sound changed behind them, engines giving way to the higher pitch of snowmobiles. Daniel's mind raced through rapidly narrowing options. The abandoned ranger station was still 2 miles away. Kate couldn't maintain this pace, and Lily was approaching the danger zone where cold stopped being uncomfortable and became deadly. Change of plans, he said, veering off the path toward a cluster of massive boulders he'd explored with Lily the previous summer. Baby girl, remember where we found the arrowhead? The cave where the bears used to live? Her voice was small, muffled by his jacket. That's right. We're going to shelter there. It wasn't really a cave, more of a deep overhang created by ancient geological forces. But it would provide protection from wind and snow. Daniel lowered Kate onto relatively dry ground beneath the rock shelf, then began excavating snow to create a windbreak. Lily helped, her small hands moving with desperate efficiency, while Ranger positioned himself at the entrance, ears swiveling to track sounds through the storm. The snowmobiles were getting closer, their headlights occasionally visible through the trees like will-o'-the-wisps. Daniel made a tactical decision that went against every protective instinct screaming in his head. I need to lead them away, he told Kate, checking her weapons magazine. Can you protect Lily, if necessary? Kate nodded, though they both knew she could barely remain conscious, much less engage in a firefight. Daniel knelt before his daughter, taking her face in his hands, memorizing every detail in case this was the last time. Listen carefully, sweetheart. I need to go make the bad men chase me instead of us. You stay here with Miss Kate and Ranger. Don't come out until I call for you, no matter what you hear. Can you be my brave girl? I don't want you to go. Tears tracked down her wind-burned cheeks. I know, baby. But sometimes protecting people means going toward danger instead of away from it. Ranger will keep you safe. And I'll be back soon. He kissed her forehead, that gesture parents had made since time immemorial, love disguised as blessing, promise wrapped in touch. Then he was gone, vanishing into the storm with the rifle across his back, moving to intercept the search pattern before it could reach the overhang. Daniel circled wide, using the terrain's natural features to mask his movement, until he could observe the pursuit team. 4 men in police tactical gear, faces hidden behind balaclavas, night vision goggles pushed up on their helmets useless in this weather. One carried a thermal imaging device, sweeping it methodically through the forest. That was the primary threat. Body heat would show clearly against the cold background. Moving with silent precision, Daniel positioned himself behind the rearmost rider, waiting for the perfect moment when wind and engine noise would mask his approach. The takedown was swift, brutal, the rider unconscious before he hit the ground. Daniel zip-tied his wrists and ankles with restraints from the tactical vest, then destroyed the thermal imager with his rifle butt. "Contact north. He's running," Daniel shouted in a voice deliberately different from his own, sending the other 3 riders racing toward empty forest. He melted back into the storm, circling back to the overhang where 3 pairs of frightened eyes watched him emerge from the white chaos. Kate was barely conscious, skin burning with fever. Lily shivered uncontrollably despite Ranger's warmth pressed against her. "We need the ranger station," Daniel said, lifting Kate despite her weak protest. "It's that, or freeze." The abandoned ranger station sat 2 miles northeast, a relic from when the Forest Service had maintained regular patrols through these mountains. Daniel had discovered it his first winter, had even spent nights there during the darkest period after Maria's death, when being near Lily's innocent grief had felt like drowning in his own inability to fix her pain. The structure was solid despite decades of abandonment, positioned on a ridge with clear sight lines in all directions defensible. If it came to that, the last mile took forever. Time stretching like taffy as Daniel fought through drifts that reached his waist in places. Lily clung to his back like a barnacle, her breathing shallow but steady. Kate drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling about evidence and corruption, and something about her father's hardware store. Ranger broke trail where he could, his powerful body creating paths through the lighter snow, occasionally circling back to check on his humans. The station finally appeared through the storm, a darker shadow against white, its door hanging off hinges. Snow drifted through broken windows, but the stone fireplace remained intact, and Daniel had cached supplies here years ago. Emergency rations, water purification tablets, first aid supplies, even antibiotics he'd obtained, through questionable channels, but always kept rotated and current. He worked with desperate efficiency, barricading the door with an old table, stuffing jackets into window gaps, starting a fire with wood that previous visitors had stacked along one wall. Kate's fever had spiked dangerously, her skin burning even as she shivered. Daniel crushed antibiotics into water, forcing her to drink despite her weakness. Lily huddled by the growing fire. Ranger pressed against her, both watching Daniel work with absolute trust that he could fix this. Could make everything safe again. "Is she going to die, Daddy?" Lily asked, voice small in the wind-howling darkness. "Not if I can help it, baby." But privately, Daniel calculated odds that grew worse with each passing hour. Kate needed a hospital, surgical intervention, resources he couldn't provide in an abandoned building during a blizzard. The USB drive sat heavy in his pocket, its contents potentially worth multiple lives, but whose lives, and at what cost? "Tell me everything," he said to Kate, needing intelligence to plan their next move. "Who exactly is involved? How deep does this go?" Through chattering teeth and fever-dulled thoughts, Kate painted a picture of corruption that reached from street-level officers to city administrators. Chief Morrison ran the operation with corporate efficiency, maintaining detailed records that proved his confidence in never being caught. The drug sales alone generated hundreds of thousands monthly, but that was just one revenue stream. Confiscated weapons disappeared into black market sales. Evidence vanished from lockers when the price was right. Cases fell apart because crucial documentation mysteriously disappeared. "Why didn't you go straight to the FBI?" Daniel asked. "I tried. Made contact with an agent in Denver. Arranged to meet tomorrow today, I guess. That's when they must have realized what I was doing." The accident, she laughed bitterly, coughing up blood-tinged saliva, was supposed to look natural. Winter roads. Officer responding to emergency call. Tragic, but not suspicious. "If you hadn't come along," Ranger's growl interrupted, low and continuous, the sound of death approaching. Through cracks in the boarded windows, Daniel saw flashlights, carefully coordinated, surrounding the station. They'd been found again, but this time there was nowhere to run. Kate could barely remain conscious. Lily was exhausted and hypothermic, and Daniel's shoulder had begun stiffening where old shrapnel scars protested the cold and exertion. "Daniel Harris." The voice carried through the storm, amplified by megaphone but still familiar enough to freeze Daniel's blood. "This is Detective Mark Evans. We need to talk." Mark Evans, his former squad mate, the man who'd dragged him from a burning Humvee after an IED tore through their convoy, who'd held pressure on his wounds for 3 hours until medevac arrived, who'd stood beside him at Maria's funeral, and promised to always be there if Daniel needed anything. Mark, who'd brought Lily that stuffed rabbit she still carried everywhere. "I know you're in there, brother. Let's handle this like civilized people. Send out Officer Miller and whatever she gave you, and you and your daughter go home. No one wants to hurt a child." The tactical psychology was transparent. Establish emotional connection. Create false choices. Manipulate through personal history. But knowing the technique didn't eliminate its effectiveness, especially when the voice belonged to someone who'd literally saved your life. "Mark," Daniel called out, his voice carrying across the snow. "You know I can't do that." "Sure you can. You always were the smart one, the one who thought things through. Think about this. You've got a little girl who already lost her mother. Don't make her an orphan over some crusade that isn't even yours." Daniel felt the weight of that truth pressing down like the mountain itself had shifted onto his shoulders. Save Kate and expose the corruption, risking Lily's future, or preserve his daughter's innocence at the cost of justice for countless others. The choice should have been simple: family first, always. But Maria's voice echoed in memory, her last coherent words before the morphine took her under. "Promise me you'll raise her to be brave, to do what's right, even when it's hard." "You've got 60 seconds to decide," Mark continued. "After that, we come in, and things get messy. You know I don't want that, but I've got orders too." "Orders?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "Since when did you follow illegal orders, Mark? Remember Kandahar? That colonel who wanted us to fire on civilians? You told him to court-martial you before you'd follow that order." Silence stretched through the storm. Then Mark's voice returned. Quieter. Tired. Carrying the weight of compromises that had seemed reasonable at the time. "That was war. This is different." "No, it's exactly the same. You're following orders you know are wrong because it's easier than standing up. How many families have you destroyed with your drug dealing? How many kids have lost parents to overdoses from product you put back on the streets?" 30 seconds, Daniel. "Don't make me do this. You remember that family in Kandahar? The ones hiding in the bombed school? You said leaving them would haunt you forever. How many families are haunting you now, Mark?" "Time's up." Daniel looked at Lily, her face illuminated by firelight. Trust absolute, despite fear widening her eyes. This was the moment that would define who she became, what she believed about right and wrong. Whether standing up mattered even when standing seemed impossible. "If you want her, come and get her," Daniel said, checking the rifle's chamber. "But Mark, remember that you taught me everything about urban combat, every tactical approach, every breach technique. You sure you want to test your own training?" The first gas canister crashed through a window, white smoke billowing into the room. Daniel had anticipated this, immediately grabbing Lily and pushing her toward the root cellar he'd discovered during previous visits, a hole beneath rotted floorboards that connected to a natural cave system. Down. Now. Ranger. Guard. The dog followed Lily into darkness, while Daniel helped Kate toward the cellar, her legs barely functioning. The door exploded inward. Men in tactical gear flooding through smoke. Daniel met them with controlled violence, using the rifle stock as a club, the confined space negating their numerical advantage. His body remembered combat in ways his mind had tried to forget. Muscle memory guiding strikes that disabled without killing. He wouldn't make Lily watch him take lives unless absolutely necessary. Kate managed to fire twice before her strength failed, one shot taking a tactical officer in the vest, driving him back through the doorway. But there were too many, too well trained. And Daniel was one man protecting two vulnerable people against a coordinated team. Mark entered last. Older now, gray threading through his beard, the same calm competence that had made him an excellent soldier. Their eyes met through the smoke, years of shared danger creating understanding without words. "You always were too stubborn for your own good," Mark said, raising his weapon. Daniel moved faster, the rifle stock crushing into Mark's wrist, sending the pistol spinning away. But Mark had always been better at close quarters, and Daniel's injured shoulder betrayed him. They grappled, crashing into walls, each knowing the other's moves like a deadly dance they'd rehearsed in a dozen firefights. Mark got position, his arm around Daniel's throat, the chokehold that would end consciousness in seconds. Daniel's vision began to narrow, darkness creeping in from the edges. Then, "Daddy!" Lily's scream erupted from the cellar, followed by Ranger launching himself from the darkness. 90 pounds of trained aggression striking Mark at chest level. The detective went down hard. Ranger's jaws locked on his arm with pressure that stopped just short of breaking bones, a warning, not an attack. "Everyone stops right now." Kate's voice, impossibly strong, cut through the chaos. She stood propped against the wall, Mark's dropped weapon steady in her hands despite the tremor in her legs. "Next person who moves gets shot, and I've got nothing left to lose." The tactical team froze, training warring with loyalty, self-preservation calculating odds. Mark lay still beneath Ranger, blood seeping through his sleeve, face twisted in pain and something else, shame perhaps, or recognition of how far he'd fallen from the soldier he'd once been. "You don't understand," Mark gasped. "It's not just money. They have leverage on everyone. My daughter, Emily. She made a mistake at a college party. Photos that would destroy her life. They own me. They own all of us. Everyone has a reason," Kate said, though her strength was clearly fading. "Every criminal thinks their excuse is special. You chose this, Mark. Every day you stayed silent. You chose it again. The FBI is already coming," she continued, and Daniel heard the bluff but supported it. "I transmitted everything to their Denver office an hour ago. This USB is just backup. You can kill us all, but it won't stop what's coming." One of the tactical officers lowered his weapon slightly. "Is that true? Does it matter?" Another responded. "We came here to kill a cop and a kid. That's not what I signed up for." The group psychology shifted. Daniel could feel it. That moment, when a unit's cohesion fractures. These weren't hardened killers. They were cops who'd made bad choices, who'd justified small compromises until they found themselves in an abandoned ranger station preparing to murder innocents. "Stand down," Mark said quietly. "Everyone, stand down." "Boss," I said, "stand down." Mark's voice carried the authority of command, despite his position beneath Ranger's watchful presence. "It's over. We're done." Weapons lowered, hands raised. The mathematics of survival suddenly favoring surrender over resistance. Daniel maintained his position, not trusting the sudden capitulation, but Ranger seemed to sense the change. his jaws releasing Mark's arm, though he remained positioned to attack if necessary. "You have no idea what you've started," Mark told Kate. "This goes higher than you know. Judges, state officials, people with resources to make problems disappear. Testifying won't keep you safe. They'll find you. All of you. Then we'd better make it count," Daniel said, helping Mark sit up while keeping the weapon trained on him. "Whatever time we have, we make it count." Sirens wailed in the distance. Growing closer, real ones this time. State police and FBI converging on coordinates Kate had managed to transmit before leaving the cabin. Mark laughed bitterly, understanding that his choices had led to this moment as inevitably as gravity pulls objects toward Earth. "I'm sorry," he said, looking at Daniel with eyes that held the ghost of the soldier he'd been. "I know it doesn't matter, but I'm sorry. When Emily needed me, when they threatened her, I should have found another way. You would have found another way." "I don't know what I would have done," Daniel admitted, thinking of Lily in the cellar, imagining someone threatening her future. "But I know Maria would never forgive me if I bought Lily's safety with other people's suffering." Within an hour, the ranger station swarmed with legitimate law enforcement, state police, FBI agents, federal marshals, creating overlapping jurisdictions that prevented any single group from controlling the narrative. Kate surrendered the USB drive to a female FBI agent who'd driven through the blizzard from Denver, starting a chain of custody that would eventually reach prosecutors in Washington. Daniel sat in an ambulance, exhaustion hitting like a sledgehammer now that adrenaline was fading. Lily pressed against his side, refusing to let go of his hand, while Ranger lay across their feet, his muzzle still stained with Mark's blood. Through the ambulance's open doors, they watched Kate being loaded onto a stretcher, IV lines running, her skin pale but her eyes fierce with satisfaction she'd done it. Against all odds, she'd exposed the truth. "Will she be okay, Daddy?" Lily asked, her voice small and tired. "She's tough, sweetheart. Tough like you. Like Mommy was." Daniel pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "Yeah, baby. Exactly like Mommy was." The investigation unfolded like an avalanche, starting small but gathering mass and momentum until nothing could stop it. Chief Morrison was arrested at his home, his wife screaming about frame jobs, while officers carried out boxes of evidence he'd been foolish enough to keep as insurance against his co-conspirators. Within the first week, 15 officers were indicted, 6 city officials implicated, 2 judges removed from the bench pending investigation. The Cedar Falls Police Department would eventually be placed under federal oversight, a humiliation that would last years. Mark Evans became the prosecution's star witness, his testimony ensuring convictions but not redemption. He provided names, dates, amounts, methods, a complete anatomy of corruption that had infected Cedar Falls like cancer. His daughter Emily was placed in protective custody, her future salvaged if not saved, the pictures that had been used as leverage destroyed by federal order. Mark would eventually receive 15 years in federal prison, eligible for parole in 7 with good behavior, a sentence that reflected both his cooperation and his crimes. Kate spent 3 weeks in the hospital, infection nearly claiming what bullets and blood loss hadn't managed to take. Daniel and Lily visited daily, bringing books and puzzles, drawings Lily made of Kate as a superhero with a badge instead of a cape. Ranger would wait in the hallway. Technically not allowed but tolerated by staff who'd heard the story, his presence a comfort to Kate who'd grown up with dogs and found their loyalty more reliable than most humans. The media descended like vultures, wanting heroes and villains in simple narratives that fit between commercial breaks. Daniel refused all interviews, threatening legal action against any outlet that revealed Lily's identity or their location. This wasn't their story to monetize, and his daughter deserved to process trauma without cameras documenting her tears. One afternoon, as snow continued falling outside Kate's hospital window, she asked the question that had haunted her recovery. "Why did you do it?" You could have walked away, protected your daughter, left me to handle my own mess. Why risk everything for a stranger? Daniel considered his words carefully, watching Lily read to Ranger in the corner, the dog's tail wagging at dramatic moments in the story. My wife died believing the world could be better, that people would choose right when given the chance. She was an optimist in ways I never was, always seeing potential where I saw problems. When she was dying, when we knew treatment had failed, she made me promise to raise Lily that way, to believe in goodness even when evidence suggested otherwise. Walking away from you would have broken that promise. That's a heavy burden, living up to someone's memory. It's not a burden when it makes you better than you would have been otherwise. Kate was released on a Thursday, spring trying to break through winter's grip, ice melting from pine branches in irregular percussion. Daniel picked her up, Lily insisting on coming along, presenting Kate with a handmade card that said, "Thank you for being brave in careful 7-year-old script." "Where will you go?" Daniel asked as they drove through Cedar Falls, past the police station where federal agents still cataloged evidence. "FBI offered me a job," Kate said. "Consultant on police corruption cases? Seems I've become something of an expert." "That's good. You'll help other towns avoid what happened here." "Maybe. Or maybe I'll just document corruption without preventing it." Systems resist change, especially when change threatens power. They drove in silence until Lily piped up from the back seat. "You could stay with us. We have room, and Ranger likes you, and Daddy needs friends who aren't trees." Daniel's ears burned while Kate laughed, the first genuine joy he'd heard from her since that night in the snow. "That's sweet, Lily, but I have to go where the work takes me." "You could visit, though," Lily persisted. "Daddy makes really good pancakes, and in summer we see bears. And I could teach you to identify birds." "I'd like that," Kate said, meeting Daniel's eyes in the mirror. "I'd like that a lot." She stayed for dinner that night, nothing romantic, just 3 people and a dog sharing a meal while snow fell outside. Lily dominated conversation, explaining her theories about everything from why squirrels forgot where they buried nuts to whether angels needed winter coats. Kate listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Lily beam with importance. After Lily went to bed, Daniel and Kate sat by the fire, Ranger between them. The silence comfortable, rather than awkward. "She's remarkable," Kate said. "After everything she witnessed, most kids would be traumatized. She probably is, in ways that'll surface later. But she's also seen that standing up matters, that ordinary people can face extraordinary circumstances and survive. That's not a bad lesson, even if the teaching was harsh. What about you? Any regrets about getting involved?" Daniel thought about Mark, facing 15 years in federal prison, about the officers whose children would grow up with fathers in jail, about the community trust that would take generations to rebuild. "Ask me in 10 years, when we know if anything really changed, or if different people just took over the same corruption." That's cynical. That's realistic. But Maria would say that trying matters, even if failing is likely. That courage isn't about winning, but about standing up despite probable loss. Kate stood to leave, pausing at the door. "For what it's worth, I think Maria would be proud of who you've become, of how you're raising Lily." "She'd be proud of you too," Daniel said. "For refusing to give up, when giving up would have been safer." 3 months later, as summer finally conquered winter's last resistance, Kate returned for a visit. She'd testified in 4 trials already, her evidence securing convictions that dismantled not just Cedar Falls' network, but connected operations in 3 other states. The FBI job had materialized, based in Denver but requiring travel to wherever corruption festered. Lily dragged her on a hike to see an eagle's nest she'd been monitoring, chattering nonstop about fledgling development and hunting patterns. Daniel watched them walk ahead, Kate matching Lily's pace, treating her observations with the seriousness they deserved. Ranger ranged beside them, occasionally circling back to check on Daniel, the dog's protective instincts extending now to include Kate in their small pack. That evening, as they watched sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson, Lily asleep between them on the porch swing, Kate said quietly, "I bought a cabin. Oh? 8 miles from here. Nothing fancy, needs work. But it's mine. Figure I need a base between assignments. Somewhere quiet to remember why the work matters." Daniel smiled, understanding what she wasn't quite saying. "Lily will be thrilled. She's been asking when you'd visit again approximately every 3 days. Just Lily? Ranger too." "He's been moping." Kate laughed, the sound carrying across the meadow where fireflies were beginning their ancient dance. "Well, we can't have a moping dog." They sat in comfortable silence, watching darkness settle over the mountains. 3 souls who'd found each other through violence, but were building something better from the wreckage. The corruption investigation would continue for years, trials and appeals and occasional threats from those who'd lost power and profit. But that was tomorrow's challenge. Tonight, there was peace. Justice doesn't always come from those in power. Sometimes it begins with ordinary people brave enough to stand when standing seems impossible. Share this story if you believe truth deserves its day, regardless of the cost.